Akhil, thank you for taking the time to meet with us today.
Thanks for having me here. And a quick background, my personal background, I'm been in supply chain operations, management, and related software technology for last 20 plus years, coming up to be 22, 23 years now.
Basically, the topic, the episode overall topic is all about data dashboards. And kind of the comment that I've had with other software companies and a manufacturer is like, would you drive a car without a dashboard? Why would you drive your business without a dashboard? Right? It's that simple. You're going to fly a plane without a dashboard. Not going to drive a car without one, right? Your business is all about data and presenting the data properly to make those quick decisions, those mission critical decisions. And you're obviously a supply chain centric collaboration tool. So people they use supply chain generically, right? So when we say supply chain, we refer to getting quotes at a part level, buying parts at a part level. Whereas maybe you can expand where you're more focused on the kind of the demand forecasting and modeling. And then is that correct?
That is partly, yes, I would say. You definitely touched upon one area where Omnix really plays in. But exactly what you said is that supply chain is becoming, for some, it is the last mile delivery. And then the image that comes into the heads is around, ships and the truck trailers and the transportation and the freight aspects of supply chain. And exactly as you said, when it's for some, it's more around procurement, even down to sourcing. For some, it could be manufacturing. But if you actually look at it, it's the end-to-end, because that's why it's called supply chain, right? So when we look at it, when Omnix looks at it, or where do we really play, is the end-to-end game in terms of looking at the demand planning, forecasting, looking at what's really happening in the market to make your decision, having that visibility and access to the data for rapid decision making, all the way to upstream, even down to the component levels and raw material level in terms of what is available, what can be done, where is your supply chain really, so to say, where could be the weakest link as you try to de-risk your supply chain going forward. So for us is a holistic view versus a particular function within the supply chain. Yeah.
What do you think are the key pain points that your technology is addressing?
One of the major pain points, what we are seeing is that if you really look at over last, let's say about 13 years, 3 decades, right? Companies have implemented all kinds of software solutions, started with ERP, and then came, of course, there was a wave of ERP and other solutions where it comes to manufacturing execution systems, product lifecycle management systems, quality management, WMS, TMS, and a gamut of these kind of software. But these are all transactional level solutions. And yes, they serve a function, they serve a purpose, and there is a very limited, so to say, view of what and how they could be used. But when it comes to how they have evolved, they have become more complex. I think where the supply chain and operations teams in all these companies, where they're challenged with is they have to pull the information and the data from these multiple disparate sources, stitch them together, process it somehow, figuring out what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, to make decisions or plan for it or optimize their operations. So where the pain points really start is down to how this data is really coming from various systems and how quickly, and as I mentioned earlier, how can we provide this data frictionless to the supply chain operations teams? It's a major pain point. So if you're looking at, for example, a demand planner or forecasting team, they need to figure out what has been sold in what store, what channel, what are the trends that they have seen, and all the data has to be processed. And there's a lot of inefficiencies in the data that is coming from the transactional systems to the or to the teams who are making decisions or planning for going forward, planning for the future. That's a major pain point that we saw early on. No matter whether it's enterprise customers, big names, or small mid-sized businesses.
And that's kind of part of what we're all about with our platform in the collaboration tools and in the dashboards. We're trying to smooth out the collaboration and provide that data up front. And from our side, we're connecting, the engineers, purchasing, and suppliers, and everybody can see that as a network. Was a quote sent out? What's the quote history? What did the supplier's quote? What were the comparisons? So we're opening up all the data to everybody real time.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to make that our section of the supply chain as frictionless as possible. So maybe you can expand out from your side.
Sure, I'll actually talk about a very common use case or challenge which we have seen, right? And I'll take one example of use case. Let's say, for example, we are looking at using the data for your forward planning, right? Whether it's supply or demand. One of the major challenges that we saw was that the data which is to be used, as you said, is siloed in different systems. And the different systems and how the data is structured or stored there is in a very, very generic form. For that, I mean is that if you have to use the data from the ERP, it has to be downloaded. It has to be processed so that you put certain semantics around it for supply chain, right? Is this number this, or is this a SKU more number, or is it an inventory number, or is it something else? So there are these discrepancies which we have seen, and ERP does the function of what they have to do. I mean, there is a saying, right? ERPs are great to execute a plan, but cannot plan to execute, right? For example, right? So in that sense, there is a function of why ERP exists, but what we have seen is that from a supply chain perspective, in today's dynamic supply chain challenges that we're seeing, you need to have the data very, very quickly. And it does not, when I say frictionless, it should not require processing in terms of downloading and then changing and then stitching and then further processing, then lookup pivots and this and that. All these elements which are there, which basically just take away the time and where the teams or supply chain professionals just simply have to chase the data and process the data. That is where what we mean by the friction that we are seeing in the market, because of existing solutions are not meant to solve today's supply chain data challenges, right? So that's where I would like to expand, is that any solution which is meant for any particular function, but then you're trying to adapt that solution, that software, for something else. That's where the friction would start coming in. Yes, of course, I'll say it out loud. ERP companies will claim that they will do supply chain planning. But I still, in 22 years, I've maybe one customer who have used advanced planning and scheduling or advanced planning and optimization of an ERP solution, which takes 12 hours to run to the scenario. And if you have made one mistake in that setup, you'll have to do that again, and you have to wait for 12 hours to get the results. I don't think anybody can tolerate that. Do that. But then, of course, they have to just, guesswork comes in, gut feeling comes in, which is all right sometimes, but that's where the friction is.
It's a very interesting point about data. So just to share my background, I started out my career as an engineer on the production floor, and then moving on to operational engineering, and then over the last 10 years was in business and all aspects of doing business, how a company works. Data has always been one of those things that is very challenging for a corporation, for any business. Integrating, we all know how, at the back of our minds, we all know how important data really is. but how do we use the data, and what sort of data we're getting, particularly like setting in a business perspective, in setting up key KPIs, key performance indicators. Like we talk about data. There's an over influx of data from everywhere. But not knowing how to interpret the data and how to use the data to the best of to make best decisions. And in the business perspective, we go into business to make money. Money is based on the data, how reactive we react to, adapt to the challenges, and present the best solution to the customers, to make it profitable. But the thing about collecting the data is a challenge for a lot of companies. You don't know what are the indicators of what data to collect. You can collect a lot of data, but then what does that do?
You brought up a very interesting point there, right? And we kind of I started at least talking about from a technology perspective, but there is what we have seen over all these years and we practice is that there are three kind of core or three pieces actually to this puzzle, right? People, process, technology, right? So we can definitely have some interesting insights. And just recently, I posted something just today, what I had written a couple of years ago, and it's still valid when it comes to the people shortages in supply chain. We'll talk about that maybe if we have some time. But from a process, what we just described is that even if you have the data, even if you're able to get it, what are you going to do with it? And one of the from an Omnics perspective, when we work with our customers, what we do is that, technology is one piece, right? And I believe that that's the easier piece, to be honest with you. We put in a framework in terms of what that process looks like, what data is important depending on the industry, depending on the stage of that company, maturity level of the supply chain, or the complexity of the supply chain. How upstream do you really want to go? Do you want to go all the way to the components, or are you a pure D2C company where you're simply buying and finished goods and you're not really managing the BOM, for example, right? Depending on what the stage of the supply chain is. But that framework is very, very important, because otherwise you could be just simply lost in that data. Even if you have a solution that gives you everything, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
So that framework comes in where you set up the business processes around that. You set up the KPIs, exactly as you said, right? And then most importantly is tracking the KPIs and the trends, really understanding, really happened, not just today, but really looking at the history of what that trend has been for that particular KPI or that particular metric, whichever, right, down from a strategic level down to the operational level or execution level, and then kind of going forward from there, without which I would fully agree with you that you would be lost in that data. It could result in more chaos.
Right.
That's the best way I would put it.
Right.
Have the best of the best tools.
Yeah. It's like having one spreadsheet, and then from one spreadsheet to 100 spreadsheets and replicated information on every one of these spreadsheets, and you're wondering, what is this all about?
Yeah.
They're trying to put it all together.
What about challenges in deployment? So I would imagine, you have an executive sponsor that says, okay, we want to deploy an Omnics solution. And then so you kind of do you kind of get involved with the organization, start learning the players, the data, the process flow, mapping, et cetera. Have you found a lot of challenges and, kind of the existing team wanting to do those changes and actually support and be a bit more visible?
I think let's put it this way, Rob, right? Before Omnics, in the past, I would say, I'd seen these challenges because I was more on the customer side, right? And then there's a software vendor who was, I was working at a company, and then there was something was being sold. And at the executive level, yes, it was, let's go ahead. This is the agenda. This is our mission. Everything fine, without much due diligence in terms of what are we trying to do here and what do we want to get out of this. And of course, there have been cases, unfortunately, where the moon was sold, right? So then it comes to those challenges. So one of the things I would like to say it outright is that one of the principles when we started with Omnix was that let's be very clear in terms of what we can do, what we can promise, what we can deliver, right? And stick to it. There could be certain cases, and earlier on, yes, I still remember where, we just simply could not, that was not our area or not our expertise, or the capability of the platform wasn't there. But instead of going forward and simply, oh yeah, let's take a very, very good example right now about AI, right? We see AI everywhere. It's a very loosely used term. And a few years ago, I still remember one of the customers, the prospective customers are talking to, oh, but you don't have AI. So we don't want to, and the way we went about it was that if you really think about AI, the situation right now is that even optimization or simulation capabilities fall under the AI umbrella. That's fine. If that's how you want to define it, Omnix has AI. But where we really started developing the solutions was around the data integrity, data quality, where Omnix AI engine basically figures out where the errors are, where there is incompleteness in the data or there's data integrity issues. That's one area where we have invested in. But we have gone down to the ground level in terms of developing these capabilities because we do not want to just simply say it and there's nothing in place and then the deployment really goes, sideways. To your point, yes, I think where the challenges are when it comes to deployment is making sure right from day one or day zero is that this is what we will deliver and we will hear you, we will understand, we'll work collaboratively with you to keep this on track. There will always be some new ideas that may come as we're going through the deployment. And that could be taken care of, right? In terms of, because it's an agile development or agile implementation. So let's say, for example, there is a certain framework or deployment of a solution. We deliver that very rapidly. And very quickly, if there are additional requirements, we are able to configure the platform and meet those requirements. But most importantly, it all starts with what you have promised, you have to deliver. And that's where the deployment really goes smoothly. Otherwise, we will always be talking about our average deployment goes from anywhere from 2 to 4 months at the most, high end. Prevalent industry model can go on for years in our space, right? When we talk about supply chain. But what do you see on your end when it comes to deployment? Do you see similar challenges or?
Just like your situation, every customer is different. And for us, it's really, coming to an agreement on the initial configurations.
Yeah.
A lot of the tactical, because a lot of companies, it depends. Some have a bit more robust setup in their procurement supply chain team. Some have nothing at all.
It's a very interesting point. You brought up earlier about the experience with an industry that does not want to adopt technology, which is also relative to what Rob was mentioning about, companies chasing sales. I mean, in most aspects, when companies start out, the business when they start out, the first thing they do is start chasing sales, sales bringing in revenue and all this. And the focus is 100% on that and not setting up the roadmap of what is it that we need as we grow. So we just all focus on the sales aspects and then literally gathering so much data, information, backlog of the history that when it's really time to dive into what is it that you've been doing as a business for so long, what is it that you need to do to continue to exist in this industry, is now become a challenge to even try to put it into perspective now. So moving away from the execution of doing something to now needing the information to do other things. So, to that extent, the industry that do not want to adopt or is fearful of adopting what's going on in the world right now. Companies are moving away from countries, moving away to other places where it's more conducive and profitable to do business. And so for these companies that do not want to keep up with so-called technology, what are the risks that you see is going to apply to them, and what happens when they really don't?
Good question. And if a short version or short answer to this is they will be out of business.
Right.
Very, very clearly, very surely they will be out of business, and very fast. Absolutely. So if we look at it, and here is an interesting kind of to think about, and I read it just recently somewhere on LinkedIn, somebody mentioned it. What if think about supply chain is actually the nervous system of your company.
Mm-hmm.
As a human being, if your nervous system goes down, what really happens?
Right.
Absolutely, right? That you cannot do anything with if your nervous system is broken, right? And I think if in the context of what you were asking here, and if you think about it, that if there is no investment or adoption of the technology, then frankly speaking, long term, you're going to go out of business. And now is also the question is not about the big eating the small, but it's the fast eating the slow, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's where I think the difference is. And we have seen it actually. There was a data, and I think it's been well circulated. I think that in next 10 or 20 years on Dow Jones and the stock exchanges, there will be the newest companies versus the laggards, right? And that is going to happen, unfortunately. Or, I mean, that's how the cycle is.
And yet, the world is multitasking at the same time as certain industries are keeping up or just learning about technology. The world is already moving forward to the extent of bringing to your point about AI. It's interesting looking into that and just kind of for businesses, probably even, in a business perspective, like for myself, I'll be thinking like, okay, which technology is a trend that is probably going to go, downhill in like 2 years, or which technology is one where I will need to invest for my business continuity and growth progress down the road, kind of a situation. So what are your thoughts about that?
From an AI perspective, we just pick on that one actually in terms of the trends or what could be a fad or a trend right now, and it might just die later on. And if I just pick on AI, I think the jury is still out on AI, frankly speaking, and from a supply chain perspective, right? Of course, you have Gen AI, right? You have ChatGPT and Anthropic and Bard or Copilot. Yeah. I think in those areas, there is absolute clear progression in terms of generative AI for those. From a supply chain perspective, though we have seen many software companies announcing Gen AI, where you go and ask a question and provides you the answer, for example, is still a bit far out, to be honest. From some of the challenges being data again, and also in terms of processing power and so forth. The demos look great, no doubt, but they are demos. Beware. But where we see from an AI perspective, I don't think it's a fad that will just go away. It will adopt. It will take some time, but definitely moving in the right direction. Where I'm wondering, and again, I don't think this is just my opinion. I haven't seen it, but maybe down the road it could be. But there was a whole talk about supply chain 4.0, right? Where machines are connected. Of course, IoT comes into play. Machines are connected and it becomes an autonomous factory, a light factory, right? Where you don't have to be in there and everything from a production, as you asked, right? Production perspective is just taken care of. I think we're still far out there. It was a trend. It was a fad. There was a hype, and now we have gone into a little bit of a what they call as the throw of disillusionment, right? Maybe as we go further, something may come out of it. But I think that was a hype that has gone down a bit, and now AI has come up, and the other hype is going on.
Right.
But I also believe that these hypes are important. They're very important because that kind of challenges you, that kind of pushes the envelope in terms of what new technologies could be used, adopted. Maybe, if you're developing something, maybe 20% becomes useful out of that, or you learn something and then you adopt that to something else. Those are some of the trends which we have seen. I think other than that, I believe supply chain is good over supply chain, unless somebody comes up with a Star Trek transponder, or you can simply create goods and transport from one to the other. I think we'll still have goods to do.
Yeah.
Digital transformation is everywhere. It's time to digitize your quote process, automate the repetitive tasks, and free up your team to focus on more value-add tasks. Don't let tariffs, travel, and lack of visibility in the global supply chain hold you back any longer.
This is the SCiMon app buyer dashboard. We have the main menu. That refers to the RFQ and the auctions, your vendor list. And then under manage, you have products, which is your product database. You have hierarchies and teams, locations, and users. Up here, you have a time frame, and then the number of events that are currently active, live events, total events, events closed. And then also here, the number of new suppliers that have been entered in the system. And then over here, this is all active quotations, and then history. And this is just showing you the status bar where we see sent, delivered, seen, and participated. This is a very key feature for the software. And then under analytics, you and I is trying to figure out price of things over years. So this is basically giving you historical prices that have been quoted, and then kind of where it was going. So that's kind of the quick overview.
Contact us for a demo and discussion on how SCiMon.co can transform your supply chain today. SCiMon, supply chain simple.
What's kind of a message you have to potential customers for Omnix, and how can they get a hold of you to discuss your solution in detail and learn more about you and your team?
I think my message would be that understanding what is the end goal, where you are at today, what do you need to go from point A to point B, point C, and further on, and how the technology is going to play a role to take you from here to there. And that's where Omnix really comes into play. And definitely adopting technology in a thoughtful manner is the key. And you can look up for Omnix from omnix.io.
Fantastic.
All right.
Akhil, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.